Hello and happy Sunday. I hope everyone is well that's joining us today in person or remotely. My name is Jonah Beaucaire, and I have the honor to found and co-found with a lot of people on this Zoom, the Hudson Eye. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background as well as the warmest welcome to this series called the Hot Topics. And we just started streaming live. So welcome with us. I was born in New York State, very close by to Hudson, to Tunisian and American parents. And in about 2006, I started creating programming, live work, exhibition programming in Hudson. And around the time of our 15th anniversary, we received an annual grant, which is all about local artists and local art spaces. The Hudson Eye was born. It will be annual, and we're very lucky for that. And the format, just for those of you who are tuning in or just in this new normal with this extraordinary 2020, as well as what has occurred in it. Every day at 1 p.m., we have a humanities series called The Hot Topics. And it's local issues in Hudson of local, national, and probably global significance. We then have a 7:30 p.m. nightly program. And this edition, actually, it's a much more walkable, mappable public art edition. So in addition to thanking Hudson Hall, where a lot of us are remote, but a good 20 feet apart, we're exploring this new Zoom webinar humanities series to keep the hot topics going post-pandemic and during pandemic. So thank you for joining us. I'm here to say thanks to Hudson Hall, to all of the local partners, also to Humanities New York, who is allowing us to work with speakers of this quality. Who are we forgetting? Oh, the J.M. Kaplan Fund, which is local to Columbia County, and the Hudson Board of Tourism. So over to Erin Levi Garvey, who is going to introduce Mahogany Brown and the panel that she's organized for you today. Thanks and stay safe. Really appreciate you being with us.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second of the Hot Topics series. Today, we're featuring Curating Hudson, and we've brought in writer, educator, organizer, Mahogany L Brown. She's the executive director of the Bowery Poetry Club and artistic director of Urban Word NYC and poetry coordinator at St. Francis College. Browne has received fellowships from the Agnes Gund, Air Serenbe, Cave Canem, Poets House, Mellon Research, and Rauschenberg. She's the author of Woke, a young poet's call to justice, Woke Baby and Black Girl Magic with Macmillan, Kissing Caskets, Yes Yes Books, and Dear Twitter, Penmanship Books. She's also the founder of Woke Baby Book Fair, a nationwide diversity literature campaign, and as an Arts for Justice grantee, is completing her first book of essays on mass incarceration, investigating its impact on women and children. She currently lives in Brooklyn, New York, and has recently concluded her curator in residence at the Hudson Area Library.
That's me. Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. My name is Mahogany L Brown. I'm very excited to be here with fellow artists, practitioners, curators, organizers, and really fly folks all around. So welcome to the virtual stage, the digital space, Shanekia, McIntosh, and Jive Poetic. You can clap wherever you are. Go ahead, start stomping your feet. And if you make your neighbors mad, it's all good. I'm going to read their bios before we get into this panel discussion about what is it like curating, specifically curating in Hudson, and then of course curating in your own communal spaces. But first, bios. Shanekia McIntosh is a writer, poet, and performer born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Raised as a first-generation American in a predominantly Caribbean neighborhood by Jamaican immigrants, her work is inspired by the double consciousness of her cultural heritage and the Black diaspora. It aims to disrupt and confront the historical colonial erasure of Black POC narratives, the contemporary byproducts of that erasure, and its continued practice today. I hope you are taking notes. It's already happening. Just the brilliance of the bio, you heard? Using the thematic palette of generational trauma, dislocation and migration, climate change, Afrofuturism, empathetic political actions, and accessibilities, the work aims to cultivate a community space to engage contemporary narratives and perspectives to upend the learned complacency of these practices. Whew. And there's another one. McIntosh has read and shown her work at the New Museum, Second Ward Foundation, Portland Institute of Contemporary Arts TBA Festival, Hudson Hall, New York Live Arts, September Gallery, and more, with recent work being published in Chronogram, Apogee, and the 10th Magazine. I'm going to jump a little bit. McIntosh co-curated Triptych, the Sunday daytime programming for Basilic Soundscape Music and Arts Festival in Hudson, New York, with poet Joey De Jesus. McIntosh is the Youth Service and Programs Assistant for the Hudson Area Library in Hudson, New York, which is by far one of my favorite libraries on the planet. So there's that. Then we have Jive Poetic coming all the way from over there with the infamous brick background, legendary in every scene. He's received his BA in Media Studies from the State University of New York at Buffalo and his MFA in Writing and Activism from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. He has performed his work in venues ranging from the Australian House of Parliament to the Thumb Theatre in Kent, England. He was also one of the 2 poets selected by the U.S. Embassy to represent American slam poetry during an international cultural exchange program in Warsaw, Poland. Jive Poetic has collected Grand Slam championship titles from Florida all the way to Germany. In 2003, Jive was a member of the Nuyorican Poets Café National Slam Team, ranking 2nd in the nation and 10th as an individual. In 2004, he was a member of the Providence, Rhode Island Slam Team. In 2005, he was a member of the New York Louder Arts Slam Team. In 2006, he was a member of the Brooklyn National Slam Team. And then he went on to co-found the brand new spectacular Brooklyn Slam, not just team, but collective, the community that is housed at Brick Arts Monthly. He is a founder of Soundbites Poetry Festival, Jam On It Poetry Festival, and if I'm correct, Carnival Slam, which happens in Antigua annually. He served on the advisement panel at the Australian National Slam Summit and was featured on 4 of TV1's Lexus Verses and Flow, PBS News Hour, BET Facebook Live, founder of Insurgent Poets Society. I'm jumping around everywhere because he does the most as well. When he is not on tour, he is hosting and teaching performance poetry and hip hop workshops to at-risk youth in New York City and surrounding tri-state areas. He's a 2017 award recipient of the John Morning Award for Art and Service, the inaugural. He was the first recipient. And finally, he hosts the Nuyorican Poets Cafe every Friday night. What else? What? I mean, we could just go to sleep after that, right? So the host has stopped my video. We're gonna start it again. That's cool. Thank you. And we're gonna get started. Are you all ready for what is about to happen? Okay, so I'm gonna just need y'all to unmute yourselves so I can at least not feel like I'm in a vacuum.
I'm here.
Hi.
Did you like me reading the bio? Was that weird for you?
Yes, it was like a Wikipedia. Where'd you get that bio from?
Your website.
That cannot be. That's what I got to talk to somebody about. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy because, you know, it's funny. I had to, this year I've been applying for a lot of stuff and it's always like, what's your bio? You know, and they want the art bio. Like, this is what my work is about. And basically my roommate convinced me that like, I needed to like have that be on my website, but now everyone's been using it. And I'm just like, it's not for that. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
Is it harrowing because it's so much, it's so dense? And did you realize that like how far your work stretched? Or is it just like hard for people clapping for you for like 10 minutes?
I think I don't like explaining the work. And I feel like, you know, it's so funny when you're straddling, you know, obviously the two of you have that experience too of like straddling this line of like, the lit world is such a totally different bio, you know, like you're trying to give a different bio for that. And then like, you know, art, I think it's like very much like, I usually find that people want you to explain your art to them. and so it's like that bio is necessary, but it was really hard for me to write, and I think it's dense. Like, I don't know. I'm not obsessed with it. Like,
I love the density personally. What about you, Jive?
I don't know. It was, I don't know where that bio came from. But I really kind of enjoy like anonymity and invisibility sometimes. Like, I like to be around but kind of off, and so the bio forces me like right into the middle of the room for however long the host reads it. So I'm always like, eek, okay. But also it's very enjoyable. It's conflicting. I'm very conflicted about my bio. That's what it's a long way to say.
Look, let's decolonize joy right now. Let's take up space. If we haven't learned anything, us playing small does not serve anyone. So I love that y'all allowed me to read the bio, however sprawling it was, right? But what I did notice in reading both of your bios, that there is a constant acknowledgement of the work that your art is doing in the world as a tool for actual change, as a platform for looking at things and talking about things that are, usually swept under the rug. If you're not hardened by it or penalized for it, you really won't talk about it, right? You don't think about the things that affect the community in that way. And both of you are doing work that needles at it and doesn't just point at it, but also names it. So if we're thinking about your curatorial practices and your art practices, what would you say are the 3 pillars that fuel those practices? Light work.
Yeah, light work. You guys just narrow down the whole practice.
All of it.
Into
3.
3.
Okay. What's holding the house up?
I would say accessibility.
Okay.
And right off the bat, I think my poetry and like when it comes to performance could be like a little bit more abstract, but I think it's easier for people to insert themselves into it and then kind of be like, oh, this isn't for me or like about you. I think that works in that way because people tend to take something like apply it to their personal reality more. Instead of it being like, this is about me, or whatever. It's like easier for people to put themselves in that position. But just even with everything, I grew up Brooklyn, like I said in the bio. But, I was really lucky to have this like insane cultural education. Like by virtue of growing up in the city, I was surrounded by like art everywhere, public art, like museums. I had a great mom who just be like, I don't know, like this thing is free, let's go. She was always great at like finding the free things for kids. And that was actually something I continued in just going to high school. Me and my best friend, Pito, we would go to Broadway musicals on the weekends because they were free. And we could get free tickets. So we'd go okay, what's the free tickets? And we were the only ones that would ever collect them. And it'd be like Little Women, the musical. It was only open for a week, but it was cool to get to see it, but it was trash. But it's let's go to Little Women the musical, let's go. Yeah. And we'd always have like the best seats. We like walk up and all these people in their furs and stuff. We're like, oh my God, like who are these kids? We just like roll up, just like, sitting, oh, like this is our seat actually, like sitting in the nicest seats and that was free. And so, I think that for me, I didn't go to art school, but 2 things I would say that are my art school would be like my time in Hudson, surrounded by like older artists who've like really took me under their wing here, and also just growing up in New York City and having that access. So when it comes to curating, I always think about why does it have to be this like barrier, for the community? Like for me, it's like, oh, like I want the Black community to be able to show up in a space and see themselves, and like also expand what they think that like seeing themselves look like. I guess the other part is just with that is education. I think like so much of what I do at the library, like curating, it's like educating people, not trying to be doing it and like, kind of like, I know more than you, but it's just like really helping expanding people's universes, like in the work and in curating, and that's the only 2 I have.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good start. Thank you. What about you, Jive?
Okay, so the question is the three, but like three pillars that are focal points for our curatorial. Okay, so I would say consideration. I would say consideration, action, and evolution. And I think those are three that I really focus. I mean, there are obviously more, but these are three that I always find myself returning to. And when I say consideration, that leaves room for like who's included, who's excluded, who are we helping, who are we hurting, you know, how are we serving, what do we need to know, what don't we know? Like, let's consider all of the factors, you know. I would say action, because I do believe that like art, community art, all of these things have to be socially, politically, culturally engaged. We have to use this work to help our people, and our people is defined by however you define your people and my people at the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when you don't consider the communities around you, then you might actually be exploiting them, right? You might create a space where you're just taking their money to do your cool thing on stage, and then you're not giving them anything back. And I think that actually sometimes does more damage, because it might create a space where they just want to replicate that, and then they start hurting. You know what I mean? It's never a community thing. We're not moving. And I would say evolution, which is always a word I'm kind of scared to use, you know, but I would just say like the ability to evolve and expand the practice, right? Like what's the next thing, right? You know, you have to keep it moving forward. It has to keep growing because the environment keeps shifting, right? And the environment shifts, but you know, it's like using medicine from an outdated time period that you know, viruses have learned to adapt to, right? We can't fight racism the same way we've been fighting it, because it is evolving. So we have to evolve. Otherwise, it will continue to kill us, and we won't be able to defend. And I mean, that's an example, but yeah, I think those are the three that I consider pretty frequently.
I love those. Consideration, action, evolution, even though I heard revolution. So when you said it again, I put the R in brackets. And
yeah, put the R in brackets. Keep my R in the brackets. Yeah, I want my R in brackets. Yeah.
I want my R in brackets.
Yeah.
And Shanekia, you said accessibility, which was both, it sounded economic and cultural accessibility, but also education. I love those. I love those very much. Thank you. And folks, if you have questions that are brewing, feel free to go ahead and plug that question into the Q&A box there. And if we have time, we will have, we'll be able to share that with our speakers today. So both of you are obviously from different communities, and you serve several communities. You bring your community wherever you go. Jive, you came from Brooklyn. Shanekia, you came from Brooklyn. Hudson was like a meeting point for you there. What was that curation process like for the two of you working together for that week? And can you talk about what it was briefly for those who didn't know?
So there's a program at the Hudson Area Library. Specifically, it's for tweens and teens, but really it's for kids under a certain you know, like 10 to 12. Like that's really like, you know, the basis of the program. Like teens can come, but it's really for like the, you know, in between age kids. I like to joke, I like working with tweens because they're old enough to have a personality, but young enough to not realize that they could just tell you to shut up. You know, like they're not gonna be rude to you. They'll just go with the flow. Like even if it's like that's what they want. It's harder to talk to a 16 or 17-year-old because they're like, I get it, like get out of my face, but you know, a 10 to 12-year-old is not gonna do that necessarily. Anyway, this program is called Hack the Library, and we do it in the summer and in the winter, and it is it depends, either a week or like a few days digital arts media workshop. So essentially we're like, here's some stuff that we have at the library that you can use to like create work. We try to use open software programs if we can. The idea is kind of to get the kids to think about, you know, making, like doing production side of things instead of just consuming things. It's like, you can make your own video. You know, every kid wants to be a YouTuber. It's like, we're gonna help you get on YouTube, you know, like, and, you know, here you can make your own video, here's writing, here's different ways of expressing yourself. I mean, it's also like a weird, you know, for me, it's like, I want the kids to experiment and learn and have fun, but I also see it as a opportunity to teach kids who majority of the time aren't necessarily the ones who have access to computers at home and who don't have access to like you know, this broad range of like programs that people see online that, you know, it's like they want to have fun and they want to create things, and it's exciting. But I'm also like kind of like, people assume that you're going to know how to do these things, but like you won't, because you're, you know, a digital orphan, as they call them, which is like kids who are just left to their own devices. And the assumption being that because of their age and their generation that they know how computers work, but like they don't know how computers work. They don't have one at home. They come to the library to use them, you know, and so yeah, so the program in and of itself is to like empower these kids with like skills that they'll need as they get older, and also to, you know, empower them to create. And so Jive came and did a workshop with the kids for a few days.
Hack the library.
Her library.
And what was that like, Jive?
It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. You know, it was a group. It was a younger group than I normally work with, so I was very excited. I was nervous and excited, right? Because here's the thing: when I deal with kids, a lot of the times I find myself in environments where the kids aren't self-selecting for the program, right? They're like, you know, you're gonna go talk to Jive Poetic, and he's gonna teach you poetry or film, and they're hearing like, well, why don't we get to go to gym? You know, so it's like either Jim or me. So it's like sometimes
what did I do wrong?
Yeah, like why am I being punished during, you know? So these, and it wasn't the case. Like these kids were like getting there early, like we want to make films, right? And they were really, I agree with Shanekia, right? They're like this age where their brains are like, they're young enough to know we're still kids, but they're kind of old enough to like, this is the way I kind of see things. But also, they still have their imagination so intact. And that's one of my biggest obstacles dealing with adults, right? Or even teenagers. They're like so practical. They're like, well, this ain't gonna give me a job, and this ain't gonna do this, and it can't really work like that. And these kids are still believing in like, I gave a prompt about being a superhero, and for a week they thought they were, you know, at least I don't know how but the way in which they solve problems just based on their imagination, it was incredible, right? We had to do like a voiceover scenario, and my instant fix was, let's just use a phone. These kids created this elaborate setup where they had the phone and the computer, and they followed each other around. They were trying to edit it. I'm like, I would have never thought you'd do that, man. But their brains were so free that I couldn't get in the way of it. I had to let it happen, you know, because they're still so young. And it was kind of exciting and invigorating for me to just kind of watch. And really all I had to do was say, what do you think? All right, well, let's try it. And I said that so many times. And the ideas that came just kept expanding, you know, and then they did it because it was exciting for them. It was a game for them. It was fun for them. They didn't lose that childhood excitement yet. So I really enjoyed that.
I love that you said their imagination. How did you say that, Jive? Their imagination is still intact. Yes. And Shanekia, you said we are teaching them to be producers over consumers. That's right. Both of those are like, I think, imperative when we're thinking about who is going to be the leaders of tomorrow. But we have still a facet of folks who are still like learning their voice, and they're, you know, more times than not, grandparents, more times than not, single parents, more times than not, finding a new way of life. How do you curate space for the older voice? How do you make space and encourage them to have that same kind of liberation, that same kind of freedom when working with you?
It's interesting because at the library, even though I've done like a few, you know, been involved with adult programs, my focus has been on kids. But, you know, I think like, just, I guess, looking at that standpoint, you know, we have a creative writing program that we do with the Senior Center. And they asked me to like come in, like, they're like, oh, I know the teacher. And she was like, oh, would you want to come and read a poem, you know, because, you know, it's these people, and I helped them put together a zine of all their poems at the end of the class. I was like, I'll make it a zine and like do all that stuff for it. And what was really striking to me was that it was these women, majority women, who were older and who had never found their voice and were able to do so. You know, and I think that we've tried to do like we've done intergenerational programs too, where it's like the younger kids and like adults, and you know, so it's kind of encouraging this like hangout thing. And what I've noticed is that, you know, for adults, it's like it is hard to make that space because people have a really hard time, I think, letting go of like whatever they're bringing. You know, it's hard as an adult sometimes to come into a space and feel like, like especially around kids, I notice like they just, you know, like usually it's like, oh, I'm afraid like that kid's gonna say something to me or something. And but then in the moment where they're like working on an activity together, you know, then it's like, oh, like we're able to like kind of break down and make space in that way.
Yeah, it's quite humbling to be a student when you've been the leader or the teacher for so long. Yeah. What about you, Jive?
Yeah, I think when working with older people, or I don't know if I'm using that phrase, like older people, you know, it's because older than middle school people.
Sure.
I think there's some point where the environment, our various environments, start teaching us to silence the self and power the machine, right? You know, they'll be like, I don't care about how you was doing. Did you get this work done? You know, I don't care about your personal life. Is you picking me up or not? You know, it's like they teach you the silence. And I think the older you get, the less likely people are going to listen to you on the microphone, right? Well, you're old. You don't know what you're talking about. It's outdated. We don't do things like that no more. So when I deal with people who older than young, 10 years old, 6th grade, whatever, I start with the idea of the story. Like, what is the story you always tell? What is your story? What are the life-changing moments you've experienced? Because people talk about these things all the time. They want to talk about it all the time. They want to return to it. But also they're at an age, some of them, you know, are at an age where it's like, they believe the world don't care, right? Nobody want to hear that. How many times have we said, nobody wants to hear that, right? And so I use that as an access point. Tell me the story and then we'll make the art from there. Right, because it's already something that matters. You've held on to it for how many years? If it's in your body for that many years, it matters. Let's archive it, let's preserve it. Now we got it out. Now let's build it into what it could look like, you know? Because even when you set out to make a painting or you make a poem or you make a film, you still might be telling some other story at the same time. While you're editing, you might be telling me about the time you got stopped in traffic. Well, then let's focus on that story then, right? Because that's still on your mind no matter what you're doing. Yeah. And so I try to access those points and in that, I'm basically showing them I care about what they got to talk about, man. That's it. Like, I want to hear it, you know what I mean? Because everybody's going to tell you they don't.
I think that's the perfect segue when you talk about the stories that you hold.
Right.
And both of you are not just curators, not just organizers, not just educators, but you're artists. And I really think it's, you know, wild important to make space for that art. So I would love for each of you to share a piece in progress. You can share whatever you want, but a poem would be lovely. And then I have a couple of questions already waiting in the Q&A. So whoever wants to go first. No pressure. Don't make me do it, guys.
I can, oh gosh, I don't even go first. I think I just am gonna find this poem.
Okay.
That I actually just wrote.
Oh, I love the new work. Woo!
Yeah, it was really beautiful how it came about, but I'm like trying to find it. One of my really good friends who's also like, you know, an artist, organizer, all around amazing person, Don Christian Jones, I was invited to react to his work as a part of this online exhibition that's actually ending today, so it's just funny. Oh, wow. But I really liked the poem, and his body of work that he had created was, I'm like, where do I find this poem? But anyway, he had created, you know, this series around mourning, and they're really beautiful images. And
so you wrote an ekphrastic. You wrote a poem to his photography?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm like, can I find some of the photos to show? Like maybe a show and tell thing? Let me see. Really Getting it there.
So while you look for the photo,
yeah.
let's hear a piece from Jive. Yeah?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Let's do it that way.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want us to run out of time.
All right.
I want to hear all the poems.
All the poems. All right. I've been thinking, do we talk about the poem? Or we just do it and then you go and talk?
Whatever you feel like.
All
I would love to hear about your process if you want to talk about that briefly. Sure.
Okay. So, I think a lot about cultural experiences and the passing and the inheritance of culture and identity and in citizenship in cultures, right? Like we talk about citizenship in political borders and countries and states, but what about being allowed citizenship into cultures? And sometimes I think language obviously is one of the biggest signature identification cards. You speak the language, you're with us. You know, you have the right accent, you're with us, you know. And I think in this time period where people are being locked up at the borders, people are being deported, people are finding reasons that they have to leave their homes to come here anyway. You know, I think it's very important for us to all consider how we're all connected to these stories. You know, some of us are only a generation or two away from this life, you know, or, you know, it could affect any of us. So I've been thinking a lot about like immigration and these things, and I've been writing about it for years. So I'm gonna do this is kind of one of my favorite pieces to do about my connection to the immigrant experience. Rolling ocean, crashed between her toes, sand built the coastline. She tight-roped yesterday to her back, facing tomorrow with the Panamanian sunset in the most black of her mouth, full of clumsy English, rickety on her Spanish tongue, shuffling Caribbean accent marks inconspicuously. She blended in Jamaica, where Cuba gave her the sun. She spoke clumsy too in Canada. West Indian camouflaged her Panama, invisible mistress of the skies, toggling West Indian syntax, translucent at the border in full masquerade. My grandmothers were dream catchers, hopscotching countries, jumping identity double dutch, watching greener shades of brown grass darken every time she landed behind the language barrier she clutched. Yesterday's tongue under today's image, exercising her phonetics to flip acrobatic English easier for her. Foreign tongue was Spanish in Jamaica, Jamaican in Canada, Canadian in New York, reaching for citizenship, red taped out of range with immigration on her heels until her last breath evaporated above Los Angeles, as black as planned. Her maple leaf colored children sifted, accent free, obscured behind Jamaica. Panama was blindfolded, monolingual. My tongue now rolls as rickety as her English did 3 countries before, one cold shoulder ago. Latin America recognized me no more than Jamaica did, called me American boy, under breath, over unbroken speech patterns lost in translation. I felt invisible while visibly in, neither commander of enough Spanish nor patois to correct the secrets hiding her inside me, undetectable even in death. She lives around the border of my eye while I, tongues away from the language, learned to speak in the New York of my tongue 2 generations away. And I'm in the dark of this dance hall. Multiple Spanish reggae tones mocking the star-spangled portion of my red, black, and green footwork falling off of every drum beat, chuckled at me this collage of a woman. When she smiled me still. When she spoke me speechless and somehow made me homesick for a place I had never been.
Thank you so much for that, Jive. I really love
So good.
the vulnerability that you offer of just trying to locate and place the self and all the hyphens, the hyphenated self. So good. Shanekia, are you ready?
I guess. Yeah.
I think you can. All right.
All right. So I think, can I do share screen? Yeah. So really quickly, I want to just show first, these are the images, you know, Dawn produced that I was in reaction to. So I'm gonna stop share now, and I'm gonna read that poem.
Okay, let's spotlight Shanekia.
Sometimes when I close my eyes, my world shakes so fiercely and I realize I'm being transported. My eyes closed and all I see is darkness, but it is a darkness that seems to be hiding something somewhere. And in that darkness, in the hidden, it shakes so fast the whole world, my whole world shakes, my spirit shakes, and the nausea begins to grow, and suddenly I'm there. Suddenly I see a path, you take me there. Why is it more tangible in the abstract? There is an arm embracing to soothe as we crumble and falter from discomfort, reprogramming, the trained response. Unbridled passion, drive is so connected to the hate. I used to be able to hide plainly in sight from myself. One day I looked in the mirror, really looked at myself, every line, every detail, snake charmed myself. The beauty of pantomimed action and exposure, a mere reflection of her, you, the root when given a chance to heal, defiant rejection of representation of unfiltered ownership, respectability is irrelevant, finally. That doctrine means to govern reasonable actions to produce safety. It's the desire to be seen, the high being watched, passionately stripping away, a secret to freedom and resilience. A throng exposes with nervous energy matching my own, and I felt at ease in the presence of someone familiar. Your hand into mine. A reminder, no one cares until it's them and then it's too late. We used to say if it happened to one, then it did all. Let's create the new Black myths and legacies, no longer predicted in the old colonizer's tale that history is for the victors. Narratives created and distributed are all that will be left. What if we win? The act of creation a win. Bring me to the light blue hue in your skin and the heavy sigh of the waves. That's funny, Zoom reading.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And where were those photos taken? Do you know?
Wait, I do. They're in southern Italy, on the coast of Sicily, and it's called The Politics of Mourning.
Wow. I love that phrasing that no one cares until it's you, but we say if it happens to you, it happens to everyone. That juxtaposition, that quick pivot was wow. Stunning. Beautiful work, both of you. Thank you, artists. And back to your curator's hat. I only have 2 more questions, and then we're going to jump to the questions in our Q&A. I have one from Ria, so that's cool. Thanks, Ria. What are the things you've learned about yourself and your community since curating?
That's a great question. I mean,
yeah.
I think while curating, I think the biggest lesson that I've experienced is how important art is, but also how people are trained not to see that importance, right? People are automatic, like there is an environment, there's a machine that's just designed to stomp out the art and the creativity and make it seem useless and trivial and all of these things. And I realize that contributes to how our stories get preserved. That contributes to how we're seen in the world. It contributes to how we even function and survive. You know, if you tell people like, listen, that's not serious, don't take, but this is how we're sharing it and willing culture for it. But if they stop us from doing that, then they stop us from, right, sharing our traditions. And I think that's far more important than I ever realized, right? Well, I mean, I was aware of it, but I didn't realize it was such a universal, I don't know if universal, I don't know if everybody's experiencing it the same way, but I realize it's a very widespread problem where we learn to silence the ways in which we've traditionally shared our stories and our creativity. And I see how important that is. And also even in myself, right? Like how, you know, I spent a lot of my early career in poetry making up stories, right? You know what I mean? And there's time for that, right? There's time to make fiction. There's time to make allegory. But I also learned that I have to create stories that talk about my actual experience as well, because what will happen in 100 years, and they want to know who I was. They'll just know what I imagined, and maybe from there they can figure out. But I could also just tell them, you know, and I should be able to do both. So I think I've learned the importance of having to tell, to document, archive who I was in this moment, you know, and make other people do the same.
Wow. I think, whatever, I've learned a lot. I don't know, like working with kids is always like an eye opener. Like I feel like I Yeah, like I feel like it just, Drive talked earlier about like the imagination, the kids aren't practical. And I feel like it's helped my practice because it's made me be like, oh yeah, don't go for the practical thing. Like we can figure it out, to like go there. So I've learned to like get in touch with like that kind of impulse and imagination. But, I think for me, the biggest thing I've learned from like in this community of Hudson is, to have done the free range series with my friend Shaba Self and my other friend Mike Mosby, which was, when we did it, we're like, we want a Black party in Hudson. The one Black Black owned bar in Hudson closed. And we're like, there's no space to gather anymore. Like everyone goes to the Half Moon, but we need a Black party, like we need to have the Black party. And it was so interesting for me because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring in all these people and like, all my friends are like Black queer rappers. So I'm like, we're bringing in the Black queer rappers, and like, will they like it? Will they not? But it forced me to like really, get to know the community here, the Black community here. I'm not from Hudson. I do a lot of work in Hudson for Hudson. But the community here stretches back generations and generations, not being like, oh, I didn't go to school with you, or like, I didn't grow up in the like block. It makes it a lot harder for me to, really feel a connection with the Black community here. And it was actually through weirdly doing this party that I was able to like, really not just like in passing, like, hey, but like really like meet this like the community here and the Black community here, and really feel like I'm a part of it in a real way.
Thank you for that. The question from Ria is, how do you implement technology as a learning tool when working with young people? And I think you already touched on it with digital orphans and using the laptops and the video recorder in a space, but are there any other ways, any new and improved ways, any tried and true ways?
I just feel like the phone, everyone, it's funny because you're like, I just assume that most people don't, you don't know what people have, but like no matter, even if it's not the fanciest new phone, it has a camera, like every phone has a camera, and just letting the kids know that, yeah, you can borrow your big brother's phone or your mom's smartphone, or like, use your phone and like, you can make stuff with that. You don't even need an app. Like you could just like film things. And so, like, I think just the kids opening up to the reality that like, oh, everything that I have, the little tools that I do have, or whatever they feel like are little tools, like actually massive, and they can continue to like make work and do stuff with it. So that's kind of what I think, and also like in Hudson, we're like very happy to collaborate with this Rebecca Borer, who does Hack the Library workshops too. We have a public green screen at the Hudson Youth Center right now. So anyone in the community can like go and use that green screen and like create work, part of and like kids have used it to make videos. But part of what's so exciting about that is that it's for all ages, but it's also the kids are like, oh, so I just like film this. I'm like, yeah, your TikTok's gonna look popping now. I'm like, this is me trying to relate.
Yes,
TikTok's gonna look good, like you got your green screen, it's gonna look nice and sleek when you do it. But I'm sure Jive also has a lot of like suggestions too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shanekia is absolutely correct too, and also in pointing out the idea of the digital orphans, right? And then the digital natives and the digital immigrants, right?
Right.
Digital natives are people who are born into that environment of digitech, and the digital immigrants are people who remember not having an email address and then having to migrate over to get
That's
one.
me.
Yeah, okay. But like those worlds create an interesting space where I can bring something visual, and the digital immigrants will be like, wow, how'd you do that, right? And then the digital orphans will be like, whoa, we saw this, we get to do this now. And then the people who are already digital natives are thinking like, great, this is what I know how to do, all right? And it creates a space where everybody's kind of connected, and it makes this horizontal teaching plane where everybody can kind of explain to each other. I think one of my favorite pieces of tech to use is the smart board. I really enjoy the smart board. It's like a touch screen that goes on your wall, right?
Yeah.
And so what I've been using, like when I teach my DJ class, I teach the DJ class, I figured out a way to hook the DJ equipment up to the smart board so I can move the music and manipulate it with my hands, and they can see it, and then they can understand, they can go back and rep, because some people just learn visually, right?
Yeah.
Giving them text is going to make them not want to do it, right? And I was one of these kids. I have glasses now. I found out the reason why, because I needed glasses my whole life. But but the thing is, our healthcare system is set up where if you need glasses, that's not as important as, I got to feed everybody in the house today. So squint and eat the cereal. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is, it's like with the smart board, there are kids who I can show a visual and say, this is step 1, this is step 2. And they'll remember seeing that picture, And so with the smart board, I can show media. I can bring media that's not online because it's old or it's underground, or I can actually do things. Like I can edit. I can move their lines and their poems around with the, selecting tool, and they'll see the editing process instead of me telling them, I can show them this picture plus this picture means metaphor. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that really pulls them in because it's something they can, they're in a visual world. Their kids are receiving information faster than any group on this planet has ever in the past, right? And so they're used to it. They can't get it in a couple of seconds of reading, and they don't need it. But they see it, boom, they figured it out. They've accumulated, assimilated, and that's it. So the smart board is really one of my favorite pieces. I get excited if I see a class that has one.
I'm gonna look it up. I'm like, a smart board. I'm like, is Emily still here? Emily, we need to buy a smart board now.
I like the smart board, man. You plug your computer right inside of it. You can.
Yeah, it's kind of, one time I went to the library conference, Emily Shamiz, who's the library director, brought me, and every time I went to a panel, I'd come back and be like, we need a 3D printer, like we're failing. And Emily's like, what is wrong with you? But I love hearing about new tech, and thank you so much for that. I'm definitely gonna look it up. Because I do see that thing too of the kids where it's even with hack, we try to do it in a way where they don't get bored, because it is kind of volunteer. They can leave whenever they want. I'm always terrified of them realizing they could just leave, because it's not school, it's not mandatory. And I think, for me, I've just noticed Jeff is so right about the kids just being and I think people too are adapting to that kind of learning technique, of the more visual oriented thing.
Right. There isn't only one way to learn. So it's super prolific now for folks to say, no, there's 3 different ways to learn. There's the books, and then there's dancing, and then there's visual art, and then there's all the different ways in which poetry even can exist. So I think Hudson is lucky to have both of y'all doing that kind of work there. My final question, as we go into gallery mode and we all are on the screen one last time together, shout out to the Hudson Eye for making this happen. Jonah, thank you again for the invite. Aaron, thank you. My last question, what would you do differently if you could? Which is very open-ended, super je ne capille. That is one of those questions that you can return to. This is your writing prompt for the rest of your life. What would you do differently if you could?
Wow, Mahogany. Hi, Harold.
I know. And actually, I'm going to pose that question to all of the participants. Just go ahead and start responding in the chat window. We can see you now. What would you do differently if you could? I think curation allows us to learn what we see, what is needed. I definitely curate from a space of scarcity. I was so used to things not existing. So now I'm everything has to exist for everyone. It has to be free, right? Which is really abundance, but I know that it's from my mindset as a young person when we had nothing or very little, right? So if I would do anything differently, I would do more abundance work, more work of we don't have to feel guilty for finding joy in the midst of grief, right? I don't have to feel guilty for asking for the things that I need as a curator to make it possible for the community. Because a lot of the time I would go without even being paid because I knew the work had to be done. And I just felt guilty naming the thing. And it took me a couple of years to be like, no, this is work, right? Like I need assistance so that I can provide too. And I don't mind coming in as a community member and volunteering a certain amount of my time, but also this is a skill set, and like you have to fill into the well. You got to replenish the well if you want the water to come back, right? So that's something I personally would do differently. How about you, Jive?
Okay, so you mean differently in terms of curation and... I think in terms of curation, I would have, and I've been trying to do this more, I would have probably tried to reach out to older generations a lot more aggressively.
I think so too. I like that.
Because I think what happened was a lot of times I do events in Mahogany. We've done decades worth of events together, and sometimes it'll be a case where we'll ask someone who's of an older generation, and then they'll say no, and then we'll say fine, or they'll say no, they won't respond. And I'm realizing now, it might not actually mean no. Generally means no, but sometimes when you're dealing with poets, their no is also because it's always no because I don't think they'll like me. Or no, because I think the young ones are doing something different. It's no, because they won't accept.
No, because I don't feel like I belong.
Right, no, because I've been othered in a specific kind of a way. And I think I would have made more of an effort to figure out if that's the case. And it's a very complicated space to push into, but I think I would have done more to be like, well, listen, what can we do to offer this to you? Because I see now there's an environment where a lot of the young artists think they walk to the top of the mountain by themselves. They don't, they don't realize somebody had to cut that trail. Somebody had to blaze that thing, and they're so exhausted from cutting that trail that you don't even see them anymore. And now, they're invisible, and they don't want to come to the slam. They don't want to come to the open mic readings. They don't want to come to because they think they don't belong. And we as younger people and younger, progressively getting younger than myself, we got to remember, like, look. We make room for our grandparents in our house. We make room for our aunts, uncles in our house. Like, let's make room for the people who came before us in whatever capacity. And I don't know if I think I tried. I don't think I tried hard enough to do that.
Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, that was really, that's such a good point. I feel like it's so funny. Like, the older I get, the more I'm like, this erasure of Black women, I won't stand. I'm always finding out about someone where I'm like, oh, they're really out here doing this thing. And I love it because I'm just like, oh, like like this is something I can grow from, but I'm always shocked when, for me, it's like, you got to respect the elders. And part of that respect is knowing that they were there, because I think just with the system that we have, like in our world, but just capitalism in general, it really, we've been socialized in this continual erasure of like our history. And to like kind of put those people like, oh, you did that thing, great. Especially when you're talking about artists and poets, especially, kind of more like marginalized art forms. It's not like, if you're not like a musician and singing and like that thing, like it's not as a public kind of outpouring, and I feel like I'm kind of like, I'm over it being, well, this is the one person per generation that gets to have a career for the next 40 years and everyone else is like erased, I mean, I do feel like at least, for the community that like I have outside of Hudson, like arts world, like, Black and brown people, I feel like there's more of like, oh, I got this thing, so you're getting it too, energy of kind of trying to build together a new thing. But anyway, just really, really powerful point. Because I'm always like, that's the first thing that irked me with like artists like my age or younger. It's like, you gotta know your history. You can't just come in here and think you're inventing the wheel.
That's
like,
right.
That's just not how the world works in any way. There's like, we have to honor those people and our ancestors. It's so important. And the only way to make good stuff too, I think. But the thing that I regret, right? What? I was supposed to do something.
What would you do differently? Not necessarily regret.
What would I do differently? I think, it's interesting because I hear you, Mahogany, when you were talking. I was like, yeah, man, I wish I advocated for myself in the way that I do now. I mean, the little way that I do now. I wish I did that sooner.
Yeah.
You know, like I wish that I was doing that earlier. So that's like one thing where it's like, oh, being able to advocate for yourself, to like, you know, and someone told me once, they're like, well, you add value to us, but like we add value to you, or something like that. And I remember that was really, you know, haunting words for me, because I remember thinking, you add value to me, I add value to you. Like, that's not why I'm doing this. It's not about value, right? We're talking about community growth. And so, you know, I think for me, I wish that I was able to identify those practices and situations where that's, if like, now I'm a lot better of like, oh, that's how you think. Like, I'm not interested in like participating in your game. I'm not interested in like sharing my power with you to like make something, because I'm coming from it from a different place. I'm coming out of love. I'm coming out of growth, equity for all. I'm not doing it to add value to myself or add value to a space. So like with that, it's like advocating for myself, but also I wish that, yeah, the one thing I would do different with the advocating earlier was also knowing when to not give to certain spaces or institutions, you know, and like not, you know, not a regret, but just knowing what I know now. They didn't need them. They think, you know, and then the value of that is, you know, the thing is, they were like, well, I'm giving you value. I'm giving you, you know, these things that don't actually exist, especially when you're just, you know, wanting to be seen.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, like advocating for myself, you know, realize, you know, and firmly real, you know, it's a journey. I'm not going to stop being an artist tomorrow, you know, like this is the rest of my life.
That's
so
right.
I guess that's the thing that I would go back and do different.
That's so good. That's so good. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Jive Poetic, Shanekia, McIntosh. Shout out to Hudson I. Elena, you have been amazing. Jonah, I'm gonna pass it to you. My name is Mahogany L Brown. I'll see you on Twitter, Instagram, out on TikTok. But you know.
Yeah, no, and I want to harmonize with you, Mahogany, too. Please follow Mahogany, who has been incredible to work with, so smooth to work with, as well as these unbelievable panelists. I hope you'll follow them on social and support them and get behind them. You've also just done an unbelievable job at organizing this. One thing that Hudson I just wants to say as well, and Aaron, feel free to chime in, but like I thought back when you asked that incredible prompt is what would we do differently, I thought I would have to sort of break the ice or something, but this has been a really incredible panel because you all are so close, if not friends and colleagues as well beyond the Zoom. But one thing I can say maybe from the organization is that we're at March or April, we were like, oh wow, are we keeping a nonprofit open? Okay, yes we are. Okay, with New York State mandates, someone let us do this. Okay, yes, they will. So I think in addition to the strain of 2020, I would have loved to, under normal circumstances, we would have done much, much more with youth. So I really appreciate the panel and also what each panelist brought on that subject, because whether it's what we've all just lived through or where this is headed, I think you all really highlighted the youth component. So I wanted to say thank you. We'll give Aaron kind of the final word, who conceived of the idea to bring you and then all the three of you together. But one thing we're working on these days to make more legible and more transparent, because the Zoom format is super hard anyway, is this unbelievable organization, but also its board. You'll find the most unbelievable cross-section of humanity on this board. And in fact, Shanekia and I were talking about it last night. You can tune in with other programs of hers during the festival, but be it a board member who's on the call, if I'm not mistaken, is Peggy Pollenberg, who's local and who's our newest board member. The son of the president of Togo, who is getting involved, curators who are responsible for like identifying Kara Walker and then really sticking with her. We really try to credit everybody and also to make that legible, because there's a lot of support behind you, not only just on this panel, but we want to follow through too.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing,
Yeah.
Jonah.
For sure.
I just want to echo Jonah in my gratitude and thank you for such an incredible panel. I mean, I feel pretty amazing having just seen two new pieces, like two new poems, like right off the bat, like right here, right now. So that I thought that was like really incredible and special. So I hope that all of the attendees do feel like they got the absolute richest content presented today from you all. I mean, I thought that was amazing. I feel great. I'm gonna like watch that recording like 5 more times. So and we'll send it all to you. So and we'll put it up for people who have missed it. You can share it through your social networks. We'll put it on YouTube, and then you can have it, and you can put it on your YouTube channels. You can put it on your Twitters and Instagrams and TikToks. I mean, it might be longer than a TikTok, but you know. So
TikTok.
yeah, but thank you everyone. We look forward to seeing you throughout the week. Shanekia has our closeout performance at the end of the Hudson Eye, but there's a ton more coming through this week. So we look forward to seeing everyone throughout the week at a safe distance, of course.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Great
Appreciate
panel.
it.
Stay safe.
Safe.